Hello, welcome back. Lifting the curtain. This is episode two. I want to say thank you as well for last week. For a lot of people who tuned in, give us their opinions on somewhat of Jack's, but sometimes very strong opinions as well, which is great. That's what we want. And a few different topics come up for this week. One of them being actually come up quite a lot, Jack, was kind of old school versus new school bodybuilding. Now, I think first of all, we'd probably have to define what that is. But I would say you come from the era it is probably more back in the old school, where mine's probably that in betweeny stage, I would say, when I started bodybuilding.
I think the reason that come up a lot is because a lot of people that know me will know that just that I am more of an old school bodybuilder approach, and that's what they affiliate me with. So I think obviously that's been the driver for the what do you think about the new school?
Yeah.
But for me, I'd like to hand this over to you. I think you're more hands-on in the coaching than I am these days. I'm just having at my notes. So I think the best way to go is like, can you define, in your opinion, what do you determine? Because it's like it's so open-ended. What do
Yeah.
you determine as an old school approach versus a new school approach?
Well, I think like in terms of like the word old school, it gets me a little bit because it's like, well, what does it actually mean? I
Yeah,
think it comes from a place of, sometimes nostalgia. I think that's a big driving force in it. It's like that time was better because it was possibly simpler, I think.
yeah,
But at the same time, they had like, we talk about old school bodybuilding, RNA, all these ones, I think people refer back to that. But at some stage then we talked about Dorian Yates being old school. At some stage, that new methodology became new school. It was like, yes, higher intensity. The thing is, it's a
great point.
spectrum,
Yeah,
and
love it.
it always gets more. We learn more. So, like what we're looking at now might be old school bodybuilding in 10 years' time, and we can go,
Yes.
oh, remember the simpler times when they were doing kilo
Do you
lap?
remember the D handles?
Yeah,
Yeah,
remember the end times, and even with the sort of even the type of training, the food, probably PEDs as well, equipment. Again, it's like right, just get back to using dumbbells and barbells. But at a time, even that was probably new school. The person who made
yeah,
the
yeah,
bill
yeah,
up. So I think that like it
yeah.
really comes on a spectrum, and I think a lot of the time we look back on our time as the best time. I think really when we're talking about new school now, it's I suppose what it probably drives people a bit crazy is the probably overcomplication of it to some degree, what people would say, through probably social media, because isn't it a great way to make money to say, here's a new, better way of doing something? So I think that's it probably drives people crazy a little bit. But by the same regards, we're in an era of information where, yes, there's some that you go, oh, that's a bit much, but at the same time, it drives progress forward. I don't think, we want to be stuck back and go, it was better back in the day because like everything, it evolves. Every athletic pursuit, every pursuit evolves through knowledge, education, and then I think most of all experience too.
Yeah, 100%. I'm literally, I think what you've said there about like to every probably a decade, every decade to decade to
Yes.
decade is introduce something new. So then suddenly the decade before becomes old school. I think that's probably the best way to define it because old school from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s versus the 80s to the 90s. Well, you've just got three different totally modes of training. You've got
Yeah.
your Arnold mode in late 70s, 80s, your Dorian Yates mode in the 90s, and then in the 50s and 60s, it was just deadlifts, military press, and a bench press.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that like time scale, what you've put on that's perfect. So it's all relative to the individual's age that's asking the question as well and what they perceived was their golden era. So I don't think we can actually answer the questions that have come in about like what is old school and what is new school because like everything in fitness, it always comes with it. It depends. Like that for me should be the biggest thing. It
Yeah.
depends. It depends on everything. Um, you touched on, I wrote it down, the simplicity side of things. Now, if
Yes.
you go to our website, not doing a plug, the www.fitnessfraternity.com, and I've literally wrote a section called What is Old School?
Yeah.
And I've touched on the simplicity of it. And I think that's how, if I were to define it, it'd be the simplicity of it. It would be simple. It's literally barbells, dumbbells, cables, few machines, and intensity. And
Yeah.
that is that's it in a box for me. So old school for me is simplicity. And we didn't have this conversation off camera, and I'm pleased we haven't, because that's how I would interpret anything. What's the old school way? It was just simpler. Even about life, back in the day, life was just simpler, and it was always simpler. So I've kind of got like a little diagram here, like with two weighing scales, and I've got the information that you've touched on one bit, and then I've got the intensity, i.e., how hard you're working on the gym floor on the other. And I find the newer school approach, the scales tip in favor of information versus of intensity.
Yes.
I would like to see them switch over, where fundamentally, if you're just intense on the gym floor, if you progressively get stronger and progressively push yourself week in, week out, it's probably going to change for the
Well,
better.
when it boils down to basics, that is simply what it is. You know, it is like, can you progressively load over time with good technique and with good intensity? You know, I think the thing that's probably not annoyed me, that probably has annoyed me a little bit, is like,
Be honest.
I know, but like
Get it
almost
out.
trying to cheat the system, trying to find ways of making it
Yeah,
easier
making it easier.
in terms of the actual action by overcomplicating the science behind it. Because it is basically, I mean, it is very simple. It's the application of it, which is
Yeah,
actually the challenging
yeah,
portion of it.
yeah.
Yes, I think there are little, snippets here and there we can take from it. And that's what we should always be doing. You know, as coaches, we'd be
Yeah, but
doing,
that's life. We should evolve and we should improve and
yeah,
go, actually, I was wrong 5 years ago. I've learned from that. I'm now better now as a result of that information.
we should absolutely be looking and going, right, can I make this slightly more optimal? But even the word optimal now has become sort of bastardized. It's like, right, this, like,
Got a
you know,
stabbing pain in my back every time you say that word.
I think what I've seen as well is like, like a reps in reserve, a lot of this coming through, and people nearly, I suppose, taking the piss on that to some degree to try and again
Because
make,
that it goes back to my scales thing. So information is
yeah,
just way up there and intensity is just way down there.
and that's, that was some of the questions somebody asked as well on the Instagram, put a question box up as well. Is like, how has that changed? Like, what have I seen change from intensity methodologies, even frequency? Like, for example, Jack, when you were training, you put a picture up. My mom was like, "Who the hell is that?" And she found it. Like, what was your training? What did your training look like? What was like a basic split for you? Was it a
So I'll
very
put a caveat on this, and this blows the new school versus old school thing out the water a little bit, right? Old school generally were very heavily steroid assisted, and that changes the recovery side of things
yeah,
massively. And that's always the it depends. And for me on this debate, the steroids come into it. It depends. The new school is predominantly a lot more natural and a lot less steroid based or less steroids, more health conscious.
yeah,
So I'll start with that. So the big thing for me was I did quads on a Monday. I didn't do train legs together because the intensity, if we go back to my scales, was just so high on that quads. There's no way I was dreaming of doing hamstrings afterwards. It just wasn't going to be possible. So I used to do quads on a Monday. Then it was back on a Tuesday. So two real intense heavy days. So then I would rest on a Wednesday. Thursday I'd do hamstrings and calves. And then Friday I would generally do either a chest or a shoulder session, or push, probably what I just call a push session. So depending on what I wanted to work on, if it was more chest bias or shoulder bias, and then Saturday would normally be an arm session.
yeah,
And I used to kind of run it like that. Sometimes I'd swap if I wanted to place more of an emphasis on chest and shoulders together. I would move my back day from a Tuesday to the back end of the week on a Friday, and I would put a chest in on a Tuesday and a shoulders on a Saturday. That allowed me to give, again, intensity to both areas versus just a bit of a mixed session. But I could do that because I could, and I needed the 7 days to recover.
yeah,
Because I was assisted, I could go absolutely 12 out of 10, annihilate myself, and then I would need those 7 days for recovery. But I could recover from that level of intensity because of the assistance.
yeah,
However, if I was natural, would I have adopted that approach? No, I wouldn't have done, because I physically wouldn't have been able to recover from that load and that intensity. I would have picked up more injuries and my muscles wouldn't have recovered to be able to go again the following day or the day after.
yeah,
I would have generally probably trained 3 to 4 times a week if I was natural and done that load management, which then comes back to that reps in reserve saying. But in the old school way, it was just, I'm going to go a bit easier today. I'm fucking wrecked.
yeah.
Do you know, as simple as that?
That's a very
Fuck
good
me, my
point.
elbows are killing. I best off just, do you know what it is? I'm not going to do any pressing today. I'm just going to do some raises and some rear delts or whatever it might be. I thought I'll do an extra calf session and I'll probably chuck in some abs. That was the old school way of managing it. And I think observing the general population, the older guys and girls probably get more pissed off at these younger people because they're just making a mountain out of a fucking molehill. Make you tired. Just take it a bit easier.
Yeah,
We don't need to go to reps and fucking reserve. Do you know
yeah.
what I mean? So I think it's probably more just mountains out with molehills, where probably the older school people, the ones that look back on the golden era, think, oh, just get on with it, man. Just, roll up your sleeves.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the thing now. We're looking to find a way of like packaging all this as well. Like, like you talked about, maybe deloads as well as something that's became a lot more prevalent. Where maybe I would say, I'm going to say back in the
But
day.
Dilo, back in the day, you went
Yeah,
on holiday.
yeah,
You went on an all-inclusive to take your Egypt, got full of beer, full of food. You might do a couple of 30-minute hotel gym workouts, and that was it. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was your deload. I'm going on holiday, I'll chill out.
And then now as well, like frequency and volume, I would say there's a lot more of a swing towards like higher frequency, higher volume, but probably again at the expense of intensity.
Of
I
intensity.
don't, I don't think that's to say neither of them, but I think both can work. But I think people then get very lost when they try and become too complicated with frequency, volume, intensity, rather than swinging it back around to basics of
Yep.
actually training hard with intent. And that is, I think, the underpinning principle behind any training methodology, really.
Doesn't matter what sport you're in, intensity. But that goes back to the original point of simplicity. And that's probably why old school is looked more fondly upon from my generation and above, because it was just easier in terms of the ability to process everything. It was just simpler, just literally. And
that bodybuilding's very foundations as well was simple but very challenging, very hard. I think that's why people go towards it. Where I believe, anyways, because of social media now, it's kind of pushed people, like they've seen it and they thought, I want to do that. But because it is so hard, because it is meant to be so challenging, it's trying to find ways of maybe just skipping steps in it to some degree.
But you can't cheat the grind. If you want to be, if you genuinely want to look like that, you're gonna have to really fucking work hard. Like, but because people want to sell a lot of programs and a lot of things, they make it out to be easier than what it is, rather than having an honest conversation here and go, Joe, it's really hard. It's tough, man. It's really tough. Like, as a coach, I can get you close to that and be as pragmatic as possible. But I'm going to be honest with you and say you're not going to look like that unless you're genetically gifted. I know we touched a little bit on genetics last time. Unless you are genetically superior, you ain't looking like that.
No.
Because it's really hard, really, really difficult.
I mean, that's a conversation I've had a lot with a lot of clients. I take a lot of first timers to stage, and I think their point of view of what they believe they're going to look like or what bodybuilding's going to be, it's like that for me is a very different skill set than taking somebody like that's been doing it for 3 or 4 years or 3 or 4 seasons. You're having to
know what's coming
the whole way through and go, right, this is probably going to happen. You're probably going to feel this way because it's so glamorized now, like on stage, especially bikini girls, not to, bikini girls, like they see this, the tan, the hair, the makeup. When in reality, like especially bikini girls, the level of calorie depth they're having to go to usually to get into shape, like it is a real toughie. And a lot of them don't make it.
Because it's not normal. It's like if you line up 1,000 people, you go to any beach on holiday and line up 1,000 people, how many of them look like that? Probably one, not even 1%. Like, so to get to that less than percent, you're going to have to do something pretty different and pretty extraordinary.
And it's this, they want sustainability. Sometimes, this doesn't feel sustainable. Like, it's a extreme sport at the end of the day. It's not actually supposed, it's okay to do some unsustainable things sometimes.
Yeah, well, how do you get progress in anywhere or anything? How did any scientist crack whatever? They've had to put an immense amount of time and energy into whatever it is that they need to crack. Brilliant, I've got it. Okay. They probably didn't go on an all-inclusive to Turkey or Egypt afterwards, like, but
I'll take a rebound.
Probably had a cup of tea and said, cheers, guys. But the idea is, but you have to get anywhere, you're going to have to put a level of effort and intensity in.
And I think that's something I try and really like talk through that process with a first timer as well, as like what it actually entails be maybe what you see the highlight reel on social media. That's a big one. You did touch on something actually, Jack, which always comes up when I put up a question box now is PEDs and drug use back in maybe the old school approach versus the newer school. And this is where I think the newer school approach has positives and negatives to it. The fact being there's a lot more information out there, and I believe we have the ability to do things, I suppose, safer, not to say it's safe, but safer.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I don't think anybody could disagree with that, really. You would have to be very naive to not...
No, it's a lot more talked about now. It's a lot more open. Yes. So I believe it maybe pushes people that maybe wouldn't have wanted to go that route in the past, and they end up going that route without really...
Okay, interesting, right? So you feel because they now feel they can do it more safely and the risk isn't as large, that they're prepared to take the risk because it's smaller.
I believe so, yeah. And I think that's quite a dangerous precedent, actually, because 100%. Back in the day, I feel about 40 when I say that.
During the war.
Back in the day, lad, it was very much a sport for a very niche community, and a lot of
and that's the thing. It was a very, very small community. It wasn't no one like you were genuinely like thought of as a weirdo, really, especially historically, 60s, 70s, 80s. Like, why are these guys oiling each other up and standing there and posing? A bit kinky, innit? It's a bit Saturday night, a couple of bottles of wine deep. It's not really, it's not really like mainstream. Whereas now, it's very, very, in comparison, it's very mainstream.
It's so prevalent now. I got asked the BBC documentary on steroid use within bodybuilding community, but more so even just gym culture, because it is so much more prevalent. And I'm not here to...
So you think steroid culture is more prevalent than it was?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, see, it's so weird that I would flip it on its head. I would say, I can only talk about in here, in FF, other way around, total opposite. I'm seeing really good guys and girls naturally in awesome shape. They just don't have the density and the size, but their shape and level of training is spot on. But when I walk around, I don't see maybe I'm a bit of a recluse and miserable, I don't really go anywhere, but I don't really see anyone back in the day who were like pumping chests and shoulders. I'm
No,
really
you
surprised at
don't.
that.
You don't
Pardon?
near the eye as much either. The actual, I think the extreme use of steroids.
Ah, okay, right. So that interesting. So that's
Yeah,
old school is more extreme versus the
yeah,
newer school. It's on a smaller scale. Got it.
yeah. Smaller
Understand.
scale, but much more prevalent. Like, I mean, there is much more natural competitors now. Like bodybuilding as a whole has grown like 10 times. When people
Yeah.
say bodybuilding was better back in the day, that's open to questions. But there's so many more people doing it, which can be good and bad. Some people find their way into it, maybe shouldn't be doing it. But I believe like because there's so much more information out there, it's so much more open to compete that more people do go down the steroid route now than maybe they would have done,
Okay.
say,
Right.
10, 15 years ago. Also, the
It's
accept.
just at a smaller dose and milder, so it's less noticeable within their physique.
Yeah, or maybe their new school approach is they work into training. As well.
Wow.
So
So, comment, is it that they're just soft as shit and not training hard enough and they need to just fucking wrap the steroids in because actually there's no point because they're
yeah,
not working.
it's that I really do think that's a big part of it now. I think where the new school approach has came well is because we have a lot more experience. We have more of an understanding of pharmacology as well, but
You can
also
get your bloods taken in a van
blood
outside
work.
a gym.
Yeah,
Like, what fantastic. Because if you're going to do it, at least do it properly.
yeah,
And it'd be like back in the day, that just wasn't available to you. So you very much went your biofeedback. How did you feel? What was your body like? Was your sleep okay? Various you just had to go off your own metrics. But
yeah.
if you can get precise information that will guide you and you're not doing it, well, you're a bit of a mug, really, aren't you? Like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's your health.
That's what baffles me. People that are using and then they don't run blood work. For the expense of not going to say how much steroids cost.
Yeah, for a hundred
I don't take them,
pounds,
right?
three,
But
4 times a year, get your blood work done, and then you know whether you're in a safe position or not.
you're getting 200 markers back. A doctor can read your blood work. There's people that are paid to do that as well, that are like involved in bodybuilding, and they have a very good understanding of how you can even supplementation now. That's probably another topic too. Has come on so much that
Yeah.
it's so available that it makes no sense not to be going down that route. So, in my opinion, from the old school approach, it was much more niche, but probably more extreme because it was a more extreme sport back in the day. Where
Yeah.
now it's much more open to people to compete because of the amount of classes.
Mate, that's a great conclusion. Like, if you were to kind of wrap that up, that's how you conclude it. Probably the reason my generation and above look at the newer generation and go, pussies,
Yes.
um, is because, as you say, it's just widened itself out and the level of intensity and extreme has just gone down. So therefore, the physiques will also reflect that level that the current culture is.
Yeah.
The old school culture was more intense, more extreme, and smaller, so it made it more intimate and very much I'm going to beat you and you're no, I'm going to beat you. Whereas now people are less in competition with each other, probably more in competition with themselves, and take it to a lesser extreme, and that's why their physiques and approaches are different.
Yeah. And even within the bodybuilding scene in general, I mean, when you were competing, there's like one pro card hand out a year.
One a year, that was it. I mean, literally one a year. So again, that pushes that extreme level because if you want to be the best, then you're really going to have to be something else in order to get that pro card.
Whereas now, if looking at it like in your school, like there's a show every single weekend.
Mate, there's some people that have IFBB Pro in the name, and it's like, with the nicest of respect, hey, if you can get it and put that title in there and go on to make money, fantastic. But you're not an IFBB Pro. The standards that I would regard.
I mean, and I can't talk about that because I've never achieved that sort of, so it's not even for me to talk about, But it's definitely the standard is lower to get there because it's more open,
But the
But
industry goes back to what you said, it's been spread out, it's been diluted, and the extremism has come down.
and I think
So
that,
it's
that
inevitable.
has its pros and cons. If we look at it now, I'm not sure, you're probably not as up to date within bodybuilding generally at the
Not the
minute.
new, again, not the newer crowd.
So within the IFBB, there's for women's classes, there was bikini, there was figure, there was physique, there was open bodybuilding, there was fitness, and so there's so many. And then they've now released, this kills me a bit. This is my old school mentality comes into it, is like the fit model class. So it's actually one step below bikini. So they didn't want people quite as
I just think the qualifying criteria for that is a nightmare. How on earth do you give a guideline for that? That is so subjective. It's unbelievable.
completely. It becomes then it's like, what are we judging? Because that's why I gravitated towards bodybuilding because it was to
But
me
then,
I can
but then
be.
it's clear and it's clear and obvious. It's clear and obvious. Who's the biggest? Who's the most conditioned? Who's the most symmetrical, balanced, done within reason? Do you know what I mean? But that's interesting because if you talk about performance enhancing stuff, does that, you're just one above normal here, but then people still then want to take something to enhance their performance or physique just to get to that little bit extra. And yeah, I
That's
see
a
it
great
really
point
makes sense.
because inevitably it's competition, so people will, and that's what happened in bikini. Bikini was
Mm.
supposed to be a class where you probably, you didn't really need steroids. It was a
Yes.
smaller class, less muscled, where then obviously the competitive instinct kicks in. Well, how do I get better? I get bigger and I get a bit leaner. So they went, oh shit, it's went too far. Now we
Yeah.
need to make it a class where that was the criteria is what bikini looked like 10 years ago. Essentially
Yeah.
now, so they don't want condition, particularly, they don't want separation. They don't really want much
Yeah.
muscle. It's like it's a pageantry then. So to me, then it's no longer a sport. And that's when I will look back and go, oh, my old
So
school
the yeah.
bodybuilding ended
So the
too.
old school bodybuilder just looks at it and
Yeah.
go, yeah. So again, obviously that's driven by money, I suppose, and that the shows want to
Yeah.
create as much income as possible. Whereas they may be better off if we want to talk about retaining culture and identity, just splitting the two off altogether and go, look, bodybuilding shows are going to be on X weekends. No, not it's not beauty pageant, but we're going to call it for the sake of that. Sorry if I've offended anyone. Not beauty pageant is going to go on the other weekends, and they're just going to have to balance it. But again, money probably is the biggest determining factor with that.
It's a business now. It's very much a business. The health and fitness industry we know is like a massive business, as is bodybuilding,
Yeah.
coaching, posing, tanning, bikini suits, and everything else. It's a massive industry now. So people are going to capitalize on that. But I found that very interesting when that came up because it very much rang to the, oh, this is now new school
Yeah.
bodybuilding. It's
So, but it
like,
goes back to what you're saying. As time moves on, things just become new, and things that were before them become old school. Yeah, it's interesting. So
oh,
with that, when we talk about the money side of things and the coaching that comes with it,
mhm.
obviously being an online coach yourself, how do you observe and look at the online coaching world at the moment? What do you think, again, if we go back to the pros and the cons, where you see and where lots of good things are happening, and where do you maybe feel where bad things, not necessarily bad things, but there's negative sides to it?
I mean, right. So as in bodybuilding online coaching, more so.
Well, I suppose you could do both. Let's start with just as an overall industry, just as an online industry,
Yeah.
and then we can go more specific to the bodybuilding side of things afterwards.
I think it's the problem with online coaching as well is it's not like a lot of industries where like there's no credentials to get into it. So
No barriers to entry.
no barrier entry. Anybody can
No
say
governing body.
I'm an online coach and they can give out whatever they want. And that's information on nutrition, training, but again, also like anabolics as well.
Okay,
And
all right.
people are trusting that information and then
Non-doctors, non-qualified, non-medical professionals.
I have a clients, and that's not the I'm going to say it, but this is what the podcast is about, isn't it? That you have
Yeah,
maybe
lift that curtain, Neil.
that's a curtain lad. I've done one show,
Boo.
and now they're coaches, and then they're trying to
Yes.
be bodybuilding coaches, and there's like so little experience in there to be going and saying that, or taking somebody through that sort of process. So I just like the online with alongside marketing, there's just so much within online coaching now that you think it's very hard to stamp your authority. You need to be in it for a while, and essentially, again, it's about like getting results. But then them results, especially if we talk about a bodybuilding market, that can also be a negative because you're going to push that client in any way possible to get a win for you to show you.
Understand, right. So that's the negative drawback then,
Yeah,
because your desire as a coach and not you as in Neil Rennie, but the coach's desire as a business is to get the best wins and the best number of trophies
yeah.
possible. How far will you manipulate and push
Mhm.
somebody in order to be able to get another gold medal and another win under your name?
That builds your brand, and that's
Build your brand, but
into.
was that at the client's best interest? Was their marriage about to break down as a result of it, or were they about to just break down? Was their body about to break down? Were they reporting feedback where you're like, look, guys, we maybe need to pull back on the diet for a couple of weeks here, maybe change the show date, maybe bring you up 500 calories a day for the next couple of weeks. Let's see how you get on. Those conversations aren't being had in order for the coach to get the client to win, essentially.
Well, that's it, and especially
Interesting.
with like loss of menstrual cycle, because like it's great when they stand there on stage, but 6 months down the line when they're still fucked up, it's not so fun then. It's probably not worth the plastic trophy, and that's through a lack of client care. Even people not sort of suggesting let's read blood work or juniors coming on board that are full of steroids at like 20 years of age and here each to their own. But I feel at that age, a lot of people haven't had enough experience to go down that route and they're being led by somebody who they trust, probably an older figure.
Trust and yeah, and look up to as well. Like they're the leaders within your community. You're going to respect them and look up to them, aren't you?
So like I do think that the online game's been very much, and it's very much marketing. There's a result, no matter what the expense of, for the most part, is going to grow your brand. When it comes to the bodybuilding side of things.
So what about the online game outside of the competitive bodybuilding stage? There doesn't seem to be a lot of results happening. I don't see outside of the bodybuilding world, I'm not really seeing any online coaches. There's a few, don't get me wrong. But generally across the whole that are working with everyday people and actually getting a successful result with them where, people are dropping 2 stone and you can clearly see it, or they're visibly different in their appearance. Which if you're on the gym floor, I know I'm biased, but if you're on the gym floor, you will see a lot more one-to-one trainers get that result than you will online, and sometimes less opportunity, because online you should be able to cover 30 people. On the gym floor, you may only be cover 10. So percentages wise, you would imagine that if an online coach has got 30 people, you'd envisage that every month or every 8 weeks, there should be at least 6 of them, 20%, going, hey, look, here's my difference. Then I'm just seeing the same pictures year in, year out, same people.
No, at least, and that's the thing, on the gym floor, you would expect if we had, when we used to do the mentorship thing, we used to say, like, we want pretty much everybody over the line for the result. Maybe we're getting 90% through for some sort of result. Online, okay, people can slip through the net a little bit easier.
Yeah, but that's the price reflects that as well, though.
Yeah.
So pros and cons.
It should do. Sometimes it doesn't. That's also the thing.
Right.
Yeah. This just to give an example of this, I had a girl come on board with me. She was with another coach. She'd done a photo shoot. Then after that, again, got the result, got the marketing of it. It was a decent result as well. But calories hadn't increased for 6 months, hadn't had a period for 6 months.
So it's the aftercare that's letting a lot of coaches down as well, do you think?
But who cares at that point? So that's
Because they've already, yeah,
saying that because you've got the result, you've got the picture, that's your selling. That one picture can get you 4, 5, 6 clients, depending on how you market. So, but it doesn't matter now how that goes thereafter. And they were paying £400 a month for that, because it's on this there's this huge push behind marketing, less about result, less about client care, and more about how can I get my next 10 clients? How can I get my next £5,000 per month?
How do I get my next 10K a month so I can post a picture on my WhatsApp and tell that person in Dubai who's my mentor that I'm doing really well?
Exactly that. Yeah.
So with that in mind, how do things get better? How can we then, let's just say, if anyone that's watching this, what advice could you then lead to somebody thinking about getting an online coach? What would your advice be? How can we potentially make a small change?
If you're looking for an online coach, you literally look at, first of all, the results, but also then reach out to those clients. They're usually tagged in posts. Reach out to those clients and
send them a direct message. Yeah.
With that coach, what was your aftercare like? Because you want somebody there that's, if you have a client, yes, it's one thing getting them the result, but if you're any good at your job, they'll stay on with you.
Yeah. Well, you've only done 50% of your work, essentially, haven't you? The result is 50%. The following 50% is going, okay, I'm going to take you through a period of extreme, 50%. The other 50% is I'm going to take you out of that extreme and into a position where it is sustainable. And hopefully you're still going to be very happy with that look.
Like a lot of online coaches are built on client acquisition rather than keeping clients on, client retention, because there's that much of turnover because clients come and go. It's like they're always looking to acquire new clients. They need to be
rather than retention. So they're not focusing on retention. And so if we talk about a business perspective, I'll put my business head on. You want to look at like a lifetime value of a customer.
Yes.
I'm very fortunate enough to have people that have trained with me on the gym floor for over 10 years. So the lifetime value of that customer is very, very, very good spend. Versus, as you say, just permanently putting all your eggs into acquisition. Well, then your lifetime value is shocking. You might get 3 months at best. Whereas if you, as you say, you do a good job, you focus on the aftercare, you can retain them for an extended period of time and take them through engagements, weddings, photo shoots, birthdays, milestones, and you can grow with them as well.
That's the sign of a good coach, is having long-term clients, not a new client every single week. And like sometimes that doesn't make for the best progress photo all the time.
Yes, yeah. There's a caveat again, because you're not going to have a photo shoot every 6 weeks or every 8 weeks. Yeah.
So, but I would definitely say, first of all, look at results. Does it appeal to the sort of
do you want to? Is that your vibe? Yeah.
And speak to that client. How long have they been with them? What's their experience been like with them as well? You want to be speaking to a coach, not a business, not a team. You want to be speaking to the person that you're signing up to. And again, that's what you'll find a lot as well, is like you'll sign up to coaching, but you're not necessarily even working with that coach. You're working under
their brand.
And I have had experiences of that myself, working with coaches. as well. And, that price tag not necessarily reflecting the service in which I'd want to deliver at half the price point. And that was a big frustration for me personally this year. Just from my experience, I did sign up to one of these business mentorships for coaches. And very quickly, I think I spoke to you at the time. This just as I was in Castle. It was one of the, I regret it because it cost me $5,000 for one. But just they wanted to change how I coached, how my business, it wasn't authentically who I was. And that's not really wanted to get into it.
Okay. So it wasn't that they were, because business mentorships are great if they're teaching you how to do good business, but they wanted to also influence your mode of coaching.
Yeah.
To then generate. So, okay. So in order for their business model to work, the coaching had to become less personal, or how did that look like?
Yeah, much less personal, or charging what I see. Listen, we all talk about having our own value, but to me, it's like you want to give that value, as well. But it was very much like a backing off of like the personal aspect of coaching, or charging excessively for that same service. And even to me, it was like a McDonaldization of the business. So it's like everything must be the same, run this way, which is fine for some. But when I think when you're dealing with people in such a personal aspect, it can't be that. It can't be that. It didn't sit very well with me. Even with the brand and marketing, they wanted to take them aspects away of who I was, what I stood for. This is what I on it. The authenticity, Jack, and make it something which is pretty much a carbon copy of every single other coach out there.
Yeah, well, you can spot those that are on the same mentorship program a mile off, because they all drop the same offer on the same day at the same time on Instagram. It's dead funny.
And it's not an offer. It's not on that mentorship. It's the same. It's not even an offer half the time. It's just it's bullshit.
It's the same language. It's really funny. It's all the same language. You're on that mentorship. You're on that Dubai train. Okay, so interestingly, very interesting. Forgot what I was going to say. That's really annoying, because I was going to follow up on your. That was it. So we're talking about lifetime value of a customer. What about the lifetime value of an online coach? So what I mean by that is they wanted to change your style of coaching in order to be able to be more profitable. Okay, super. Do you feel that will that be sustainable in the online coaching world? Do you see that mode still being around in 5 or 10 years' time? Because we know the authentic one will be. So we know the most authentic, genuine coaches that are good at what they do and give a shit, they're going to be in the industry. If they want to be, they're going to be in the industry as long as they want.
Yeah.
Do you feel this mode of coaching with these coaches that have adopted this style, do you think they'll be here in 10 years?
Them actual coaches are doing it now, no. But that style of coaching will still definitely be about, because there'll
there'll just be someone else that'll just
the next one into that mentorship, and it'll be, it'll continue to do that. But as you say, the authentic ones will stay. But to me, that's a very short-term thinking for a business.
That's what I was meaning. So the lifetime value is probably better in the authentic version versus we're going new school, I suppose, the new school way of coaching people.
We had a group, and there was a guy says, Brian, got 10 calls last week. I was going, how do you get 10 calls for a start? They get like 8 of them signed up, and then he goes, so 8 signed up, now I need to figure out what to do with them. I was like, fuck, I'm away. That was
Neil Rennie has left the chat.
It's like, I don't know what to do with them, but I've got them. And again, it's like, concentrate on being a very good coach first. And something we talked about last week was like, get on the gym floor, be a personal trainer, work with people, take some of that business online. If you want to go fully online after that, do so. But
you've earned it
first,
Yeah, you've earned that. You've earned that right to go fully online. But but then again, as I said, why would you want to? You should still be able to do 10 hours on the gym floor at a handsome hourly rate to keep your ending. I think it's really important. I think it does keep the passion there as well. Not just for your own training, but helping others. I do think it keeps the passion.
You see people move, it's being involved in that environment, because it's so easy. If you're sat behind a desk on a laptop all the time, you become so segregated from that environment.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Whereas if you're on the gym floor, you're hearing other people, you're hearing what's on trend, what's not, what they're enjoying, what they're not, what they are, what they like, what they dislike. Yeah, I agree with that. It's really important. It's like being a football fan, I suppose, but not visiting a stadium. You're like, you've still got to go to the game. You've still got to, do you know what I mean? You've still got to hear the roar of the crowd. You've still got to walk up to the stadium, be cold. You've still got to have all of that. That made it what was so special for you at the start, I suppose. Yeah.
No, it's to me that's been one of my major annoyances in the last couple of weeks. Really, that's been the best.
You must be getting older. You're really mellow. I thought I was going to have you full of hell today. You're so measured.
More measured now that I've moved back over to Ireland. It's much more peaceful.
Yeah, the potatoes and that green grass and fresh air is doing you the world of good.
But no, I think that's a massive topic to me. Is the because I'm so passionate about the coaching and
Yeah.
seeing coaching held in high regards. Because unfortunately, the more negative feedback like online coaching or any sort of coaching gets, it does feed into the industry, and it becomes then something that's more of like a laughing stock and a joke, you know. And it's something that I really
So no,
don't.
this is my job, mate. This is like this is how I this is how I live. This is how I exist. This is my
Yeah,
career.
yeah, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, old school, new school approaches with everything, and
But then I
that's
suppose you can compare the coaching into that as well. There's old school coaching and new school coaching.
you know,
Yeah.
online coaches really only came about the last, to
Since
me,
COVID, really, innit? Like that.
COVID. Really, that's when it kind of took off, and I suppose people were forced into doing that. You know, and that's when the mentorships groups did really start, like I suppose, feeding on people's vulnerabilities to some degree as well.
Like,
It's
shit,
like
I've got no money. Right, well, give me 5 grand and I'll make sure you get money.
exactly that, you know, and that's been one of the biggest things I think you've seen is the mentorships coming through, and then online coaching becoming like much higher, and probably at the expense of gyms and personal training facilities like maybe your own as well.
Oh, massively, yeah. We've took a massive hit to the online world just by losing good trainers as well. So we lost 3 great trainers, and yourself, Charlie, and Tom, that were fully booked on the gym floor 1-to-1. And that was the best thing for your lives. So obviously I'm over here now. Obviously, like, I'm very happy for you. But yeah, how do we replace good coaches on the gym floor where we haven't? We're struggling. I would love to bring in more good coaches on the gym floor, but it's very difficult because we can't take a risk to employ them.
Yeah,
That risk is just too high because of the lead generation required and the investment and the ad spend and all of the crazy marketing that comes with it. And at the end of the day, then the new customer is buying the brand and they're not buying the trainer.
yeah,
So that goes back to what you were talking about before. But then if you're working that closely with someone, you need to buy that person.
yeah,
Does that make sense? You need to buy their result, their personality, their coaching style. You're not buying a brand. You are buying a brand, but it's a person that is the brand, not a gym and a wider company. So that's quite the only person that people that manage to crack it is Ultimate Performance, but they're only personal training. They're only one-to-one PT.
yeah,
So for us, we have to adopt the self-employed model. We try and be flexible in how we can get people up to full gym rent, but essentially they've got to be good at what they do in order to be able to afford to pay that gym rent. It's very reasonable. It's not a lot of sessions a week. They've got to come. It's 4 or 5 sessions a week. All they've got to do to pay the gym rent, and after that, everything else is theirs. So it's very small, but they're not even good enough to be able to build a client base to do that. Now, is that they're just not very good at marketing and they're getting washed out by the noise, or is it that just they're not very good at what they do? It's probably both, to be fair,
yeah,
because it's not a career anymore. It's not, and it's not regarded as it is a proper job. People do regard it as just, oh, yeah, so if someone says, oh, my son's a PT, all right, yeah, so he likes to go to the gym and he does a few hours a
lifting
couple of
weights.
times. Yeah, so, do you know what I mean? So I think not having a governing body, having no barriers to entry are the 2 biggest issues with a personal training on the gym floor. Having a governing body where you can hold somebody to account, like being a physiotherapist, you have to go 3 years at university.
Yeah,
I'm not saying you need to do that to be a PT, but we have to find some way of being able to govern and hold people to account and standards within the industry. And I just don't, it's so busy. I don't know how that could be implemented at this stage.
I agree, but I don't know. As you say, I have no idea how you would even go around sort of doing that. You know, and it's like if you're
I don't think
starting,
you can, mate. I think it's too much of a beast now. There's too much money to be made by training providers, mentorship programs, so on and so on. But guess
starting
who
off
it's
in
all
personal
at the expense
training,
of?
starting off in personal
Pardon?
starting off in personal training is difficult. You know, I think people see it as going to be like an easy ride, and they're going to get all these
No, you're
clients.
going to have a part-time job and
Yeah,
deliver pizzas, work in a bar, be a nighttime job essentially. Do you know what I mean? You're going to have to work in the nighttime economy in order to just to pay whatever bills you need to pay until you've built your client base. And it goes back to that intensity. You're going to have to work really hard. But I worked really hard at it because it was my job and I loved it and that was what I wanted to do. You know, how many coaches are in the industry that actually love it, or are they there just to get paid? You got
right.
to be more.
Or
Everyone wants to get paid, me more than anybody. But you got to love it as well, man.
you got to love the coaching people. You can't just love training yourself. That's the thing as
Or
well.
the money. You can't just, or even not even that. Just can't just
Yeah,
love the money. It's
yeah.
it's not going to work. Not when you're dealing with people like no way.
No, Jack, I think that was good today. I think we covered fair whack in there today. I enjoyed that one
Yeah,
too.
man.
The next week, as I say, guys, please, like you did this week as well, give us some topics you would like us to cover. I'm sure me and Jack will have a few own ideas. Let us know what you think of this one. Give your own opinions on it. We want to hear that. We're open to that as well. So please like, share, subscribe, and we will. I'm getting there with that. We will see you next week.